All right, so this is the second part of the design theory examples. The company that I'm going to start first here is with Fine and Dandy. Now I just have one design here that I like to talk about. And mainly the thing that I like to mention is sort of just to look at the amount of texture that they have. And this texture actually becomes sort of like a roll of lines within here where we have some direction with these lines going, in the horizontal direction. And then it actually slightly diagonal, which again kind of creates some movement. We have some smaller little lines, and then we have some, as far as the the design principles go, I sort of like to mention that we have some similarities here. Again, this creates unity, and then sort of just some contrasting ideas as far as the content goes, like the computer with umbrella and the kids, clouds. What does that mean? Creating a juxtaposition within using these design elements and creating, the nice composition with principles. Again, a unity and sort of a rhythm direction coming through here um, with thought as far as where everything is placed. And this umbrella brings us back through here. But we again have the content that presents some ideas as far as contrasting or juxtaposition. Now this next artist, Gianluca Falloni, I believe. That was probably terrible. Now he has two different pieces here that I'm going to show you. This first one here, sort of some text made out of common shapes, repetition of shapes, again that creates rhythm. And then we also have, besides the shape element, we have some of the elements that create depth, again with shading, and the idea as far as atmospheric perspective with the shading there. And again, the repetition of the shapes creates unity and rhythm through the piece. We also have something to kind of observe here as far as the layout, as far as where MTV Live, for example, is located. It's on the fifth versus the third area of the 3:5 ratio that we talk about in the golden rectangle or golden ratio here. So this area is the third to 3:5 here where this is located. So that creates balance and sort of a direction for the eye to follow. Room for these letters to breathe. So we have the eye hits these letters and then extends this way and then can allow us to come back into this area to discover the words again. Now this next piece here, mainly I just chose it because of the lighting that was created, and then also another for creating depth and this illusion of depth or sort of atmosphere, which is also sort of falls in the depth even though it's not listed there. But then also the idea of this whole entire drawing or piece being made up of lines, and just looking at how the lines are, it creates perspective, which gives us depth. This is a linear perspective, how they all kind of run into each other to create that depth that we're seeing, as well as observing this slight little bit of negative space here. All right, so this next artist, her name is Kimberly Delaney. She's worked for many companies, and one in particular called Stardust, if you want to look that up as well. She also has her own website, as do all of these people. Now her piece here is interesting. I chose it just talk about her use of lines and how she uses them to kind of direct us through the piece, creating this movement through the piece. The repetition and then also the direction of the lines again continued us to kind of gives us that continuity or continuance, which is within the harmony area of of our principles. Another area that I'd like to talk about here are these shapes. Hands, recognizable shapes, obviously, and the amount of shading that's on them creates the depth for the atmospheric perspective, allowing for that darker area to be shown to come back here, for example. And this sort of red area here sort of gives us the idea of sort of this atmospheric lit area, again giving us sort of a depth to our piece. The other area that I'd like to talk about that kind of involves the hands mainly, also with the lines, is the interesting thing is, again, she's used this repetition of these hands. When we see symbols that we recognize, such as hands, we tend to use them in ways based on cultural sort of ideas, as far as when we see pointing, we look in that direction. When we see a fist grasp up, we kind of feel that tension. Curving arms, we kind of follow the way those arms go. So again, how she's placed these arms to repeat, to create rhythm, and then also the harmony, the continuance of following an arm through, and then also the repetition of this. Again, also she's used the hands not only to point them in directions, but again choosing what hand gesture to use, how these fingers curve and that sort of thing creates this form that's interesting as well. Again, creating depth, and then also allowing us to follow through those differently. The lines are sort of the nice emphasis of this piece, or sort of spark as far as giving us an added piece here. This is the dominant area, or I would say the hands are, and then the lines are more or less more of the subdominant area, and then we have these sort of smaller pieces in here that give us the subordinate subjects. So again, all of these work together to kind of help us flow and discover and move throughout the piece. All right, so moving on, La French is our next area, and there's just one piece here. The one reason I chose this one is mainly just to show you that the lines are really the dominant piece here, and the people, although recognizable figures, become subdominant. The lines kind of hold and ground us and give us direction and within the piece, and the shapes of the people then subdominant carry us through in a different way, and then these lines here in the background kind of give us subordinate, kind of give us this wraparound back to these lines that are so dominant, that bring us to a point on the piece to start with. All right, so Marian Banges is the next artist I've chosen. She's most famous for her typography work. This first piece here is a poster that she designed. Again, why I chose this one is just to kind of think about how she used these lines and shapes to carry us through the piece and give us sort of direction in the manner of discovering the important information that we need to know, such as the date, what it is that this event is. But then she's created this sort of interesting design that keeps us there. Variety of the lines. So again, she has repetition of lines and color, but variety gives us this sort of interesting contrast to keep us searching and discovering. And again, the direction creates this harmony as well. Repetition and direction create the harmony for the principle. Now this next piece is all about rhythm and depth. Obviously she has a ton of repeated symbols here, and the depth within this piece here, giving shading and perspective, gives us the depth, right? Will give us this sort of variation in this repetition of shape that we see, that if you look very carefully you start to see some letters pop out. So that gives us this discovery to take a look at. Again, this repetition of the shapes and patterns and colors give us unity through the piece that is very important, as well as rhythm, giving us sort of an interest and movement through the piece, how these are lined up, for example. are very important as well. Our next area here is a group called Murdenchick. I don't know. You guys can laugh at me all you want on that one. I probably messed that one up a lot. This piece is really just based on lines. I chose this one again. The lines are dominant, and they lead us down to the information that we need to find at the bottom here. But you know, repetition and how they direct us through the piece is very apparent as far as giving us a place to follow with our eyes here. And then also this one line here is very apparent as giving us sort of our direction in our piece. And again, repetition, and you're going to hear that a lot. Repetition creates rhythm in a way. Again, we have this sort of chaotic rhythm here. And then also a direction and unity here of following, and the unity of following this one piece down here as a continuance to discover the area that we need to find at the bottom here. Now this next area I just chose as really a piece that I thought was interesting, a nice sort of design abstraction of a person, thing, mechanical thing that was sort of interesting. But really, you know, if you look at it, it's very symmetrical, except for this one little element here that you know, gets us away from that complete symmetry. So you know, you can kind of think about how you can maybe create symmetry and then maybe give it a little spark on the end of adding something that might be a little different, such as this bird here in this piece. All right, heading down to the last few artists here. Pete Harrison, he does some really interesting things with people. Here I believe this is Madonna. She is obviously a shape in this, and based on the shape kind of carries us through and gives us direction, as well as these lines here that we see, very diagonal, meaning movement, right? An interesting texture, as well as paying attention to the fact that we have some of the golden rectangular sort of format going on here, with this main area here being 5 and this main area over here being 3. So again, 3 to 5 here. Our heavy weighted area is on the larger area, whereas this nice little line extends out into that third composition. This composition, if you look at these compositions, they'd actually be okay themselves. If you held your hand up about at this line here and looked, they both create interesting compositions at that dividing line of the 3 to 5 ratio. All right, so this next area, oh, and then pay attention to the texture that they've used too to create that variety. This next one here is very symmetric. We have a shape here we're familiar with, the body, right? Our bodies are naturally symmetric for the most part. And then we've created this sort of, so this is the dominant area here. It's a very symmetric, dominant part of our composition. Subdominant to subordinate here, we have the background with some varied lines that kind of create lighting and sort of shading that create perspective or depth, right? Now here also just to kind of think about is the idea of, again, the symmetry and depth that we've created within a rectangular area. Symmetry can be created within rectangular, square. In fact, just to kind of look back to one area here, we have a very rectangular composition here as here, and they both work fine. Symmetry is probably the best way to work if you're working in a square composition. Just kind of leads to allowing for more of a balance in that way. This next area here, again, is very similar to the first one, this Madonna here, where we have a dominant figure again. All three of these have dominant people figures in them. We have some interesting texture. She's leaning in a certain way, which causes us to kind of our eye to lead in a direction. And oh, as we go in that direction, we see repetition of shape here, right? Which makes it very interesting to see that that really helps with the unity of the composition. We have these lines as well that carry us through and lead us back to where we started. And then all these little details that kind of create movement and unity and repetition in the background. Again, always pay attention to all those little details. This next one, Siggy Egertson. His piece is just mainly I chose because it was very interesting as far as his rhythm and harmony that he created with this repetition of shape. And each shape is actually then shaded in a specific way or created to kind of cause this depth or force of perspective and depth, or the perspective that gives us depth of this to kind of create this sort of, I don't know, very disoriented feel as far as what is coming in and what is coming out and what are we actually seeing here. Yes, those are words. See if you can read that. It's a challenge though. But observe how each of these triangles are separate, and really some of them are, again, contain little lines, and some of them are just one color. Some of them contain some slight little shading, but it's how they are lined up and grouped that create this interesting depth. All right. Vas and Hannibal is, I think, is how you say that. Havas and Hannibal. I don't know. I just grab these because this one, this next one, and this one, all three of these are very symmetric in a way, and then they're divided into these sort of, or a couple of these are divided into these rectangles. This one, and then this one as well, and you can pause these, are divided into triangles as well in the background. And then their use of color, repetition of shape to create interesting designs, and then how they have these simple shapes that kind of create direction here based on these little lines that come out. They kind of lead us to this center point when we come back this way, as well as this background that kind of leads us to the center. This one as well, we always have these sort of triangular shapes coming back and leading us back out to this area in the middle. The center one here is also symmetric and different in its own way, and again, repetition of shape. If you notice, all three of these compositions use very similar shapes, and again, use your QuickTime movie to scroll through those separately. And last but not least is another one by the same designers, Vas and Hannibal. Again, you can find them online. And I just chose this one because I thought it was a nice, interesting way to show depth with just subtlety in the change of this atmospheric perspective, just slightly changing as we go back into the composition to create that depth. So hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your project ones.